If you want to hear how Coraline's early childhood experiences helped her survive and save her parents later on, then stick around to the end of this video. The Other Mother was an evil entity who preyed on the souls of children living in a particular house for hundreds of years, and after a long reign of manipulation and terror, there was only one girl who was able to outwit her and finally put an end to the horrors that took place there. Welcome to Horror History. In today's lesson, I'm analyzing the life of Coraline Jones, the brave explorer who was the first to ever survive the wonders of an alternate realm called the Other World. In order to understand where Coraline got the strength needed to take down the Other Mother, we first need to take things back to the beginning. Coraline Jones was born as the only daughter of two loving parents named Mel and Charlie in the movie, but who are not named in the book. Although they do care for Coraline, they're oftentimes very busy with their work. Both of them work from home on computers, and I've never related to two characters so hard before. Coraline's favorite pastime was to go out exploring, but the house that the Joneses lived in was in a bad part of town, where people would throw away their unwanted junk, so her parents forbid her from exploring in that area. Coraline is persistent about it though, and one day her dad agrees to go with her, and they come across a stream at the bottom of a hill. Mr. Jones tells her to run back up the hill as fast as she could, and she obeys, as he stays behind. When she got back to the top of the hill, he runs up after her and picks her up. He would later explain that the air was filled with wasps, and he stayed back to take the stings in order to give her time to escape. He would explain to her that he didn't see the action as bravery. It wasn't brave because he wasn't scared. It was the only thing he could do. But going back to get his glasses, when he knew the wasps were there, that's when he was really scared. That was brave. This scene not only shows how much her father actually cares for her, but it would give her the bravery she needed later in the story. She also learned the value of resilience as a child when her mother first took the training wheels off her bicycle, and she ended up getting scrapes on top of scrapes, but had a sense of achievement when she finally mastered it. Coraline had an otherwise normal childhood. She came to find that she had an intense discomfort around spiders, and she enjoyed eating simple foods, but wasn't a fan of her father's complicated recipes, like his leek and potato stew with tarragon garnish and melted Gruyere cheese. She was also not a fan of coconut. When Coraline's grandmother passed away, she left all of her expensive furniture to the family, which Coraline found very uncomfortable, but it didn't matter because she wasn't allowed to play in the drawing room where it was kept anyway. The main story takes place one summer, 3 weeks before the beginning of school. We know that this wasn't her first year of school because it mentions that she's been there multiple times before, so I'd guess that she's going into 2nd or 3rd grade. The family moved into a new house just outside of London, which was in a much safer area for Coraline to explore and play in. The Joneses owned only part of the house. They were above Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, who were on the ground floor, and below Mr. Bobo, who was on the top floor. There was also a unit adjacent to them on the 2nd floor, which was vacant at the time that they moved in. One of the first discoveries that Coraline makes upon moving in is the door to the vacant flat, which filled her with intrigue. The door was locked, and on one rainy day, Mrs. Jones shows her that there's only a brick wall behind it, which was likely put up when the house was divided up. The next day, as she's setting out to go explore, Mr. Bobo from upstairs tells her that the mice he's supposedly training for his jumping mouse circus have a message for her, telling her don't go through the door. This seems to suggest that the animals are privy to the other world in a way that people are not, which we see later with the cats. Coraline sets out to find a well that Miss Spink and Miss Forcible told her about, which is supposedly very deep and very dangerous. And Coraline kind of finds this exciting because she finds everything else boring. School is only a week away now, and it's raining outside, so Coraline stays in and draws an abstract picture which looks like this. The eye is lost in the mist, a forewarning about how she would soon be lost in the other world. Another warning comes when she visits the old ladies downstairs, and they read her tea leaves to predict that she'll be in danger. With no siblings or friends to play with, she thinks a little danger would be some welcome excitement. Miss Spink suggests,
"Never wear green in your dressing room."
Coraline has no idea what that means, and I didn't either at first, so let's break it down. Miss Spink's main thing is that she's a retired theater actress, so she's referencing an old theater superstition that performers shouldn't wear green, because it's bad luck, and it was thought that they would not stand out from the background, which consisted of green trees, grass, and bushes. Coraline, however, while shopping for school clothes later in the story, wanted to buy a green pair of gloves to make her stand out from her classmates, and it would ultimately be her alternate way of thinking that got her out of a few scary situations. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible also give her a stone with a hole in it, which they believe might help her in some way. One afternoon, when she's once again terribly bored with her life, her mom goes out to get food for lunch, and Coraline opens the door to the drawing room, but instead of a wall of bricks, there's a hallway. It leads to an almost identical version of her world, but certain things look more sinister, like the picture of the boy in the drawing room, who's normally just staring at some bubbles, but now looks like he's planning to do something very nasty to them.
Let's get this over with so I can go home and play my clarinet!
Coraline meets the Other Mother, who is like Coraline's real mother, but has buttons for eyes and has much more interest in paying attention to Coraline. They have a lunch with food that Coraline actually really likes. "We've been waiting for you for a long time," said Coraline's other father. Yep. Typically not a great idea to talk to people who say that. They tell her that everyone has a set of other parents, she just never knew about hers until now. The rats upstairs sing and perform for her, which she finds a little off-putting, but is willing to look past it because at least it's something interesting. She goes out to explore and finds the cat in the garden can talk now. He tells her he's the same cat from her world and hints at the possibility of danger in this world. The next wonder of the other world that Coraline visits is the location that usually contains Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's flat, which is now a small theater. The audience is filled with talking dogs, and the old ladies perform on unicycles on stage before stepping out of the old lady suits and revealing that they're actually thin young women with black button eyes, perhaps to resemble the ideal versions of Spink and Forcible told about in their stories. Coraline volunteers to take part in the stunt in which this other Miss Forcible throws a knife just above her head to pop a balloon, and she gets a box of chocolates as a reward. After finding out that the theater will continue performing forever, she decides to leave and thinks it's time to be getting back to her own world. Before she goes, she runs into her other parents, who are just waiting for her there. They tell her that if she likes it here, she can stay forever. She just has to sew these buttons over her eyes. She basically nopes right out of there and passes back through the door. When she gets to the other side, the hallway behind her is replaced by the brick wall before she can turn back around. Her mom still hasn't returned when she gets back, so she watches TV as her parents are gone all day. She asks the ladies downstairs about them, but they haven't seen anything, and are about to take off to visit Miss Spink's niece. She goes to the supermarket to get her own meal, which consisted of limeade, cake, and apples. She wrote a story on her dad's computer, but at 3:12 a.m., her parents were still not back and she cried herself to sleep in their bed. Now I think this is an important sequence because Coraline's parents are gone and she has free reign to do whatever she wants all the time, but it isn't as fulfilling as she thought it would be. Just as the other world appears to be this amazing place where everything is catered towards pleasing her and she finds that it has its drawbacks, the real world is also less fun without limitations. I think we've all experienced this in some form. When you're old enough to buy your own groceries, you don't just buy your favorite food every day because then it's not special when you do have it. The next day she's woken up by the cats. Being back in the real world, it doesn't speak, but it leads her to the mirror downstairs, and in the reflection she sees her parents looking sad and alone. Her mom leaves a message with her finger which says "help us" backwards. Coraline knows what she has to do. She gathers her bravery, marches up, and calls the police. One of the funniest parts of the book in my opinion. Of course, they don't take her seriously at all, so then she brings a couple of apples and the stone with a hole in it and heads back to the other world with the cat.
What we do here is go back.
The other mother is waiting for her there and tries to tell her that her parents gave her the slip because they weren't interested in having her anymore. She has one of her rats steal the key to the gateway door, thus trapping Coraline inside. Her other parents go to bed, and the cat suggests that the other mother loves games, and maybe if Coraline challenges her, she can win her parents' freedom back. Coraline is terrified to sleep in the other world, so she barricades her room using the toy box before she goes to sleep. When she goes downstairs the next day, things are getting even more weird than they were before. She goes to her other father's study and finds him just standing there, kind of pretending to work, but not actually getting anything done. She realizes that the house is mostly the same as her house, but there are a few small differences, like the snow globe on the drawing room mantle, which is usually empty. She also realizes that this other reality is really just the house and the property that immediately surrounds it. She figures out that the place was created by the other mother to catch her like a spider in a web, and that she hasn't bothered to create anything beyond what you could see from the house. Then she notices that the trees further back in the distance look worse and worse, and it gets more and more misty, and she eventually walks all the way around and back to the house as if it were one large sphere. This entire description reminds me of one thing: a video game. The other mother created this world to entice Coraline and get her to want to stay forever, just as a video game developer creates a fun world for the player. If you break outside the boundaries of where you're supposed to be, the developers put less effort. The trees look very pixelated because you're not supposed to see this part up close. You're supposed to stay immersed in the game. That's what video game devs want, and that's what the other mother wants as well. I think there's a video game metaphor in Coraline. It's very similar to the favorite food analogy I mentioned earlier. Playing a video game can be fun, but you don't want to just spend all your time there and lose touch with the real world. When Coraline gets back, the other mother locks her behind the mirror for having poor manners, and it is there where she meets the ghosts of the other kids whose souls were stolen by the other mother, one of whom refers to her as the Beldam. They tell her that the Beldam will take her life, joy, heart, and soul and leave her hollow. And yes, I'm aware that my logo resembles the hollow mask from Bleach. You can stop commenting that every day. The next day, the other mother brings her back through the mirror into the kitchen, and Coraline challenges her to a bet. If she can find the souls of the ghost children and her parents, then the other mother must let her go. Other mother accepts, swearing her right hand on it, but Coraline has no idea how she's actually going to find these things until she sees her reflection in the mirror, where the adder stone given to her by the old women downstairs is a glowing green coal. This gives her the idea to look through it.
Okay. Yeah.
Here we go. Do you say?
Oh my god. What?
And that is when little Coraline decided, you know what, I'm out. No, but she did find an ember-colored marble that emitted the voice of the ghost boy and collected it. Which, by the way, is another video game comparison. I can't tell you how many video games force you to collect 3 spiritual stones or 101 power cells or whatever these things are.
All I need to do is jump across this. No! You've gotta be kidding me!
So she gets the marble, and with each one she gets, the world around her kind of starts falling apart. The next place she looks is in the theater, where the book describes some of the most horrific creatures ever created. Coraline goes in search of the next soul in the theater, which is now abandoned and dusty. She casts a torchlight upon the ceiling and sees these dog bat things. They aren't too scary in the film, but in the book, they're described as hairless, jellyish creatures that may have once been dogs but had wings and hung like bats and spiders. There's some kind of egg sac thing behind the stage, which contains 2 heads, 2 of each limb, and when viewed through the stone, Coraline could see one of the souls glowing inside. So Coraline actually had to reach inside of this thing, Beldam style, and retrieve it. But she accidentally wakes it up. When she sees the face, I can't even describe it any better than it is in the book, so let me just read that excerpt. It resembled the younger versions of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, but twisted and squeezed together like 2 lumps of wax that had been melted and melded together into one ghastly object. Yep. That's pretty messed up. One of the hands grabs out at her and starts yelling at her, calling her a thief. As much as I love the movie, I'd kind of like to see the David Cronenberg version of this, mostly just so I can see his interpretation of this scene. When she gets back out, the world is starting to contort and lose its form. She tells the other mother that she's found 2 of the 3 souls, and other mother tosses her a key to the other 2nd floor flat. Remember, this is the equivalent of the vacant flat from Coraline's world. It's her curiosity about that area that got her into the soul mess, and it would get her into more trouble again here. This is the most haunting location that Coraline ever has to explore. She finds a giant dead spider in the bath, one of her worst fears, and eventually makes it to a trap door leading into a cellar. When she gets down there, she turns on the light and finds crude paintings on the wall. The bulb was not bright enough to fully make them out. There was a bad smell from a rubbish pile in the corner, cardboard boxes covered in mildew, and decaying curtains, under which she noticed a pair of feet. She comes to find that the feet belong to a pale, puffy, deformed blob that sits up and stares at her with dark button eyes. I would conclude that, like everything she had encountered in the other world, the other father she had seen was only an illusion. The Beldam had manipulated this thing to look and act like her father in order to trick her, and she had discarded it here when she was done with it. I think maybe the creepiest part of this is how when it speaks, a mouth opens in the mouthless face and strands of pale stuff sticks to the lips. This is also an important moment for Coraline's character development because she tells herself, "You can be brave," which is a reference to the story about her real dad getting stung by the wasps for her. Now she's got to find that same bravery to maneuver her way out of this situation and be the one to save him. She gets out of it by pulling the thing's button off when it attacks her, running for the trap door and locking the abandoned flat when she escapes. Her last place to look is the top flat where Mr. Bobo normally lives. In this world, there was no man up there, just a horde of rats that give form to the man's clothes. She spots the last soul glowing in her viewfinder, but it's being taken away by one of the rats. Coraline gives chase but ended up falling on the stairs, and the rat appeared to get away, but luckily for her, she had befriended the cat, and he'd captured it, earning her the final soul. Upon finding it, the house flattened even more until it looked like a charcoal scribble on a gray paper, and she quickly went into the house to find her parents and confront the other mother. The ghost children speak to her through the marbles, telling her that the Beldam won't hold true to her word even if Coraline wins, so she comes up with a cunning plan to outsmart her. After spending pretty much the entire adventure thinking about it, Coraline realizes where her parents are hidden, in the snow globe on the mantle, the one major difference between the 2 worlds. She tells the other mother she thinks that they're in the passageway between the worlds, thus getting her to open it and prove her wrong. Coraline grabs the snow globe while her back is turned and throws the cat and is able to escape back to her world, bringing her mom and dad with her and freeing the souls of the children. When she gets back home, she appreciates her world for what it is, and we know that she's completed her character transformation when she falls asleep on the uncomfortable armchair in the drawing room. Her father makes pineapple pizza for dinner, which is kind of a compromise for her. She eats the pizza but leaves the pineapple chunks. Pineapple chunks are the only good part. That night, she dreamt of a picnic under an old oak tree where she played with the children whose souls had been rescued. It was a sweet moment because she finally has friends to play with in a way. But then she sees a shadow across their faces, and they tell her that there's more that she has to do. The other mother had sworn by her right hand to let her go if she won the game. So now the hand was scuttling around the world like a spider, trying to steal back the key. The next day, Coraline visits Miss Spink and Miss Forcible again, and they tell her almost everything is well, but they do see an ominous hand in her future. Coraline comes up with one final plan to try to do away away with the other mother once and for all. She sneaks back to the spot that she had initially set out exploring for when they first moved into the house, the old well, making sure that she's not followed. She removes the planks from the top and sets up a mock tea party, using the teacups to weigh down the picnic blanket and hide the fact that the well was open. Then she goes back to the house, dangling the key around her hand for all to see, and loudly says where she'll be playing. And this prompts the hand to go after her and try to steal back the key. She places it in the center of the picnic blanket, and the hand goes crashing down into the depths of the well when it weighs down the blanket. She replaces the planks, forever trapping the hand at the bottom of the well. That night, as the summer ends, she hears what she thinks is the mouse circus, getting ready for a performance upstairs. Coraline's story is, like many tales about kids her age, a coming-of-age story, but her transformation deals with much more nuanced themes. She goes through the stage that every kid goes through, where their interests are maturing and they have to learn to balance these interests, something that you're very used to doing as an adult, but can even then be sometimes challenging. I think the biggest takeaway is that you have to learn to appreciate the dull parts of life because they make the exciting portions that much better by comparison. She also has to learn to grow up and face her fear in a mature way, taking examples from her parents and ultimately using those experiences to save her real mom and dad when they need her most. So that's the history of Coraline Jones, but there's so much more lore to unpack with her greatest enemy, the other mother, or the Beldam. So make sure you join me for my next horror history to learn all about that. Your homework this lesson is to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.